Good afternoon, everyone. It's our first class day of this. This is Michelle. I think everyone in here knows me. This is my first met briefly. But been in the Army, 16 years active duty, and I had 2 years reserve time before that. Been using troop leading procedures the whole time. Most of the time, didn't even know it until one day as an NCO, we had a class on it. And I was like, oh, yeah, we do kind of do that all the time. So anyways, I want to talk about troop leading procedures. Does everyone here know what troop leading procedures are? Alright, so I like to think of them as kind of like a recipe for success. There's like 8 steps that if you follow, you're like 99% guaranteed to succeed in your mission.
Alright, so let's go around the room. Name one. Sergeant Kramer.
So things you need to succeed in mission?
No.
Successfully
Troop
plan.
leading procedures. Yep.
Troop leading procedures. There's like 8
No
of them.
Googling or binging.
Receive the mission first.
Receive the mission. Okay.
Supervise.
Supervise. Okay.
Develop a plan of
Recontoitor.
Can't hear you.
Develop a plan of action.
Okay.
Yes.
Recontoitor.
Reconnoiter.
Disseminate the upper and the warning order.
Okay. So make a warning order. Make a full plan.
Okay.
Implement the plan of action.
Is that?
Implement the plan of action. I'm guessing.
Set troops in motion.
Motion.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
In the right
Start initial movement. Yeah. And initiative. Yeah, we hit all of them.
Okay.
We hit them all.
Like number 1 or 2, whatever. Alright, so in my opinion, troop leading procedures are important because they're a simple means of ensuring success, whether it's like your personal success, if you're the key lead on planning the mission, or whether you're part of a team, part of an organization, at the commander's level, for example. It could mean like the frag orders that we get every week, the operational order that takes us through the whole fiscal year. Could mean success as a unit, like the whole company being successful at daily, accomplishing daily duties as well as long-term planning events, such as quarterly training, etc. So a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of times we're using it without even knowing it because it's how our leaders have done it since we were junior soldiers, and you get brought up to kind of act in a certain way or maybe do things in a certain order, and that becomes the standard on how you make orders, issue orders to troops, and get them to accomplish the missions for us. Alright, so with the, you have to ensure that all the steps are completed or gone through, and this really means checking on things, and I think it might have been your BOC graduation, or the one before it that I went to, and the key leader, or I'm sorry, guest speaker, was talking about, hey, like, he would say asking is not checking, right? He said it like 3 or 5 times. And so I was like, at first I didn't really get it, and then you think about it, so PCCs, PCIs, you have your soldier getting ready for the range or whatever, I could ask him, like, hey, Jackson, is all your stuff ready for the range? And he's gonna say yes, sir, right? He's not gonna tell me it's not. And then he'll get to the range and maybe he doesn't have a camo band on his thing, or maybe he never got the name tag sewn on, or could be missing the LVD or flick, whatever you wanna call it. But so asking isn't checking, so to be successful in the PCC, PCI portion of it, you have to really check and make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. It doesn't mean micromanaging. It's simply ensuring that the standards being met, that goals are being achieved, and benchmarks are being met. Alright, the reference for troop leading procedures, FM 5-0. So as the commander said earlier, the troop leading procedures will mirror or incorporate the same steps as the military decision-making process, or MDMP. Leaders from the company level down don't have staff officers, like the way the lieutenant commander has all his staff to help him accomplish the mission. Luckily, in Alpha Company, we have an XO that will assist Captain Terry, but other than that, he's counting on all of us to read the orders and to implement the guidance that's given there. So this takes us to step 1, which is receive the mission. So Captain Terry, as the commander, will put out guidance, normally through frag orders, sometimes through email and other means, verbal means, but he'll put out his intent. And so we as leaders must receive the mission. So we have to interpret his intent, make sure we clearly understand it before we start anything. So that's part of the checking, right? Is to make sure that we're completely 100% sure. I've asked him probably 100 questions since we started with frag order stuff. It's like, hey, it says this. Is this what it means? Or sometimes I'm way off, and it's a good thing I asked. All right. And so receiving the mission is we want to step 2, and I can tie them in together. So step 2 is issue the warning order. So as stated, you have to make sure you understand the commander's intent before you can issue the warning order. So once you receive that information, you translate it to something that soldiers can act on, which would be the warning order. And although it's not as complete as the operation order will be in a later step, it gives them a heads up, like, hey, be prepared to, or on command, execute such and such. And And so you get as much detail as you can at the time, and then prepare for making the tentative plan. Part of the warning order process, is anyone familiar with the 1/3, 2/3 rule?
Yes.
Commander,
We've heard of it.
Sergeant DPHO, you know what it is?
Like I said, we discussed that thing once or twice, but I didn't.
So, what is it?
Well,
Alright, so yeah, so the first third, so you're gonna issue this warning order. You wanna do that, say you're doing a mission 12 hours from now, you'll issue your warning order at 4 hours from now. That gives you time to gather as much information as you can and issue the warning order. And that gives the soldiers involved 2/3 of the time to do their planning and preparation, which is gonna include all kinds of things, recon, rehearsal, etc. Alright, so step 3 is to make the tentative plan. In a time-constrained environment, the company commander typically develops a singular course of action. However, as time permits, you can develop several COAs for comparison purposes as time allows. So step 3 begins immediately after issuing the warning order, and which sometimes is immediately after he receives guidance from higher, and of course there's situation dictated. So step 4 is to initiate movement. Like I said earlier, when you initiate movement, it's not just get soldiers going somewhere. You want to get them going in the right direction. So with the understanding of the commander's intent, the issuance of the warning order, and your plan that you've already created at this point, which is not finalized, by the way, is still being refined as you go, you want to initiate the movement. So this step can be executed at any time throughout the sequence of the troop procedures, and it can include movement to an assembly area, battle position, new area of operation, etc. It doesn't always mean, like you say movement, a lot of people associate that with like, say like a deployment or a large group convoy. It doesn't have to be that big. It can be getting several of the key tasks, get small groups of soldiers moving on specific tasks to facilitate the execution of the course of action later. Alright, step 5, reconnoiter. Same root word as reconnaissance. Basically what you're doing is you're going ahead, you're checking things. So I'll read from the slide on this one because it's kind of specific. It says that to exploit the principles of speed and surprise, leaders should weigh the advantages of reconnoitering personally against the combat multiplier in the form of supplied information from the battalion's C2 information system, C2 being command and control. Basically what that sentence says in layman's terms is it's always better for the soldier, or excuse me, for the leader to get out there and do the recon themselves rather than relying on information from other sources. So it's kind of common sense, but the sentence sounds really professional. Alright, so leaders may be able to plan the operations through unprecedented amount of combat information supplied by higher echelon recon and surveillance. However, if time permits, the leaders should verify the information themselves. Alright, step 6 is complete the plan. So we already talked about the issuance of a warning order, and now we're talking about the operation order. So during this step, the leaders expand their selected or refined course of action into complete operation order. They prepare overlays, refine the indirect fire list, complete sustainment, and to meet C2 requirements, and of course update the tentative plan based on the latest recon or information. So you could have had something in your warning order that when you conducted your recon, it just didn't make sense. So you've changed that and incorporated that information and adjusted fire, and now when you present the operation order, then you're going to be able to execute the mission based on the latest information. More likely to succeed. Alright, so whenever you're issuing these orders, the warning order and the operation order, you should stick to the 5-paragraph format for the orders. If you have any questions about that, you can always reference the many frag ords, op ords, and warrant orders that we've been issued found on the SharePoint site. We should have all seen them by now. But anyways, that just keeping it to the scripted format will help ensure that everybody gets the right information and gets it in a format that they're familiar with and understand. It's basically keeping it simple. Alright, so step 7 is to issue the op order. So before you prepared the operation order, and now you're issuing the operation order. The operation order will precisely and concisely explain both the leader's intent and the concept of how they envision the unit accomplishing the mission. So it's like commander's intent plus CONOP equals, hey, here's your mission. And it should be understandable by the soldiers by sticking to the prescribed formats. Op order is delivered quickly and in a manner that allows subordinates to concentrate on understanding the leader's vision and not just copying down what he says verbatim. So rather than having like a dictator or maybe like envision like a college professor giving his class and the student writing down like every single word, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be like, look, here's the mission, situation, and you just go down the list and you just present the facts that the soldiers need to act on. Alright, so the leader must prepare adequately and deliver the op-board confidently to quickly build and sustain confidence in his subordinate. Alright, step 8, the final step in the process is to supervise and refine. So after issuing the op-board, commander and subordinate leaders will ensure that the required activities and tasks are completed in a timely manner prior to mission execution. So that's necessarily about making sure benchmarks are met, etc. You have to supervise to make sure it's there. Obviously, you don't want to set forth this plan, give it to the soldiers, set soldiers in motion, and then just abandon it, walk away, and say, okay, they're good, they understand, they briefed it back to me, we're good. No, you can't take hands off until mission's complete. So you're supervising every step of the way, you're refining the process. Even though you did the recon, things can still change in a real-time environment. So you want to follow through with it. And also, when you say time permits, have alternate courses of action. It's always good to have a contingency plan that you can implement in the case that something fails. Alright, part of the whole planning process should be rehearsals. So you want to rehearse, and I'll give you an example here in a second, but rehearsals are essentially practice sessions conducted to prepare units for the upcoming event. A lot of times it's preferred to use like a sand table method, but there's 100 different ways you can, maybe not 100, but you can use rock drills, you can use a whiteboard, you can use soldiers moving around the floor as a battle space, etc. Based on available resources, you're going to come up with the best way you possibly can to conduct the most realistic walkthrough or talk-through method that you can to give the most valuable information to the soldiers. Alright, so just to go back over the 8 steps. Step 1 was receive the mission. Step 2 is issue a warning order. Step 3 is create a tentative plan. Step 4, initiate movement. Step 5, reconnoiter. Step 6, complete the plan. Step 7 is issue the operation order. And step 8 is supervise. Alright, so I'm going to briefly discuss an example of using a troop leading procedure so that everyone can kind of relate it to real world situation. So an example of a time that I used troop leading procedures successfully was during the second quarter when we were planning the convoy for the move training. Most of us were here for it. You'll be able to pick it out from context. But so Sergeant Lessman and I received the mission from the commander, and he said to us, "This is what I want to happen," and gave us the key tasks, etc. So what we did is we issued a warning order to all the drivers that implemented that information, plus what bit of information we could gather at the time. And we made a plan, Sergeant Lessman and I. We sat down together. We had actually 2 or 3 meetings during the planning phase, and discussed a whole bunch of different scenarios, different routes, and then we started necessary movement, which, like I said earlier, isn't necessarily the convoy itself. What we did is we had drivers that were going to PMCS vehicles, dispatch vehicles, and those type of tasks that needed to be done prior to the beginning of the mission. Okay, and then, so step 5, recon. We actually went out in POVs and drove the route that we planned to drive, both for familiarization and to count the time that it would take to drive that prescribed route to make sure that it met the intent for the length of the training exercise. Everyone was on schedule, we had a certain timeline to meet, so we had to make sure the route that we had selected would meet that timeline. And that there were contingency routes in case one got closed off, we had a different route to get back to the main road. So once we did that, we completed the plan. With that information, we incorporated it in, added significantly to the warning order, and there was a lot higher level of definition. Some of you there for the different briefings and could tell that the research had been done, and now it was a solid plan. We issued an operation order to the drivers and TCs. Everyone that was involved in the convoy received a copy of the operation order. And then as we executed the mission, it was supervised. So I was there as the platoon sergeant for the role. Sergeant Lessman was the convoy commander. And the whole time we're taking notes. We communicated with each other to stop. Like, hey, this part was a little bit quicker than we thought. What can we do to fix that? All right, how do we adjust this route? We just got notified by the S2 that this route is closed. So which way we're gonna go? Sergeant Lessman sat there with a map and a couple of the drivers, and we planned the route. And that's an example of the supervision phase of it. So the result was a successful, well-executed mission. Met the commander's intent. There was no loss of life or equipment, and we got some good training out of it at the same time. So I've got a a couple what ifs that I just want people to think about briefly before I finish. And so when you have a plan like that, like say the convoy, then you think things like, how could this fail? And this is part of the planning process that Sergeant Lessman and I talked about. It's like, okay, this is our tentative plan. How could this fail? Where are the weak points, right? So we identify weaknesses and try to have a plan for it. So I want to ask a question that I want somebody to answer. So how could this go wrong if I didn't fully understand the commander's intent? It's alright.
Maybe you didn't understand that you wanted the soldiers to actually drive tactical vehicles. It was supposed to be just a driver's training 40-hour course, and that was it. So you didn't coordinate with someone to assign the vehicles.
Alright, and that's a good example because at one point we did actually discuss an administrative movement in the TMP bands, like the Stateville GOVs, in case we couldn't get tactical vehicles. So that's an excellent point. Yeah, I mean, there's 100 different things that could have gone wrong. I like that number, if you haven't noticed. But tons of things could go wrong. If I don't fully understand the commander's intent, we could have done something crazy that had nothing to do with what he actually wanted us to do for the training. And then the soldiers wouldn't get out of it what we intend for them to get out of it. And talking about the warning order, how is that useful? Even though it's incomplete, how is it useful to troops to receive kind of like a heads up warning? Alright. What?
After that, I'm getting my heads up to know that to expect that whatever said mission is likely to happen, not necessarily going to happen. And
Good.
what's the purpose of it is. So they can grab the available resources.
So give them the heads up. Now, could the mission still be a success if you didn't have a warning order? It probably could, but having that warning order, giving them that knowledge in advance is definitely going to be an asset to you, and it's going to contribute to greater success in the long run. Obviously, making the plan is a necessity. We don't need to talk about that one. The recon. So in this situation where we did the recon and the POVs, how did that contribute to mission success?
By driving the route, you're able to see if certain roads on a rainy day might get flooded. Instead, even on the day, maybe trees fall, just getting a good idea of what the route could be like in certain situations.
Identify potentially hazardous terrain. We actually did realize that the very last leg of it was, as we drove down that, I think something later was in the back where all the dust was being kicked up and you couldn't see more than like a tenth of a mile. And so that part was cut out of the convoy because of it. But yeah, absolutely, the reconnaissance is there to give you a better understanding of what you're actually up against. Because you can sit there on Google Earth or Google Maps all day and say, oh yeah, this looks like a great route. This is actually what GPS suggests, but that's not always the best thing. Completing the plan can't be skipped, so you're obviously going to issue the operation order. I'm not going to talk about that. And then just to double tap on supervision, it's absolutely critical to supervise and also to refine as you go. You don't necessarily need to stick to the plan. Sometimes information changes after the plan is made, after the operation order is issued, and you have to be able to adjust. So you have to incorporate that into the plan itself and have those contingencies built into the mission guidelines. Does anyone have any questions about troop lead procedures or what we covered today? This concludes my brief. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sergeant Davis.